So my request to you is that I will show you certain things in the beginning. Just briefly look at that and then we will discuss a few things. The same thing, same cup. So this is about learning the world. It's a physiological response. Your senses are functioning physiologically. You shift, you use the eyes, but it then becomes the tool of the mind. The mind is in action. So I actually purposely showed you these two pictures. And when I showed you this, what did you actually see? Did your eyes go to the writing first? Like this one. Did you go to the writing first and then looked at the picture? Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I wanted to show you that how powerful in such a space, letter occupy only very little space. But for a literate mind, immediately the eye goes there, and often the rest is missed. If there is more to read, you are trapped in reading only. You know, you hardly ever see. So basically, see, what I'm trying to talk about is how literacy changed the very nature of language and reshaped our beingness. That is what I'm trying to explore today. And I'm actually sharing experiences. I'm not trying to tell you any theory. I'm sharing certain fundamental things that can be experienced by anybody. So I have experienced it, and what I'm requesting you all is not to jump into immediate conclusions from the mind, because the mind is going to defend and attack. Because the mind is not used to seeing. Mind is quite used to reading and thinking. So I'm requesting that our natural way is to see, is to, so there is a complete change that has taken place because we have been engaging with literacy. And it is this, from experiential to mental. That's one other thing. From context, so from contextual to dependent. From process orientation to product orientation. From knowing to knowledge. So what I say is that human beings have become human knowings, because we are so much concerned about knowing that we have lost our sense of being. Being is lost, but we know everything, but we don't know how to be. And knowledge as a product, I think I consider that as the beginning of modernity. How this, it's quite like a chicken and egg situation. We don't know what came first, but somewhere one can see that the productification of life, is probably the beginning of our disconnection with the processes of life. So modernity and indigeneity is the cognitive conditions shaping our beingness. So this is what, because many people are told they are indigenous, but I want to look at it more as a cognitive category rather than a physical thing, that you're born there. That's not the point, actually. If you're born as an indigenous, but if you've gone to school, then I would say that you're no longer indigenous, because indigeneity as a cognitive ability, cognitive quality, because it shapes your beingness. It is not about where you are born, but how you have been shaped. Whether you have been shaped by your conditions, your context, or you have been shaped by the books that you're reading, or by literacy. So what happens is that, the anthropocentrism is the product of modernity, whereas, so that's one other thing, that you retain your biocentricity if you're indigenous. And one is mediated knowing, other one is direct knowing. So this is the another difference. One is direct knowing, because see, senses we don't have a choice regarding senses. It functions, it's not your choice. So without any choice, we are being the world, we are knowing the world. And what has happened is that this has led to an anti-nature, anti-life beingness in modern people. And of course, the indigenous people they are nature itself, they are life itself. They are not, I don't think we could call them pro-life or pro-nature, but they are life itself. So the distinction I'm making is that literates learn the word and illiterates learn the world. And what I say is that the package is mistaken for the product. This is what happens. The literates are learning the container and illiterates learn the content. And so my personal journey has been that I stopped reading. And that actually made me eligible for true learning. And luckily, I had no academic interest at all in whatever which was purely an existential interest to truly understand what is life. What is this whole drama called education, which takes people actually away from learning, away from life. So I could say that my process has been knowing by being, not by thinking, reading, or, analyzing, no, by being. And so my first thing was that I started learning from the illiterates. I started living with rural tribal communities. And of course, my graduation was learning from children. And of course, my PhD is from learning from hen and clay, from, life around with, so-called, of course, modern people think that they are not intelligent at all, but I find they're extremely intelligent. At least they know how to sustain life. And learning from nature, it's effortless, experiential, non-intellectual, and choiceless. Learning is not a choice. Because we talk about freedom and all in a very, very different, distorted sense. So another thing that I want to talk about is that, see, fundamentally, there were two biological changes that took place in our human journey. The first was when we began to eat cooked food, from raw food to cooked food. That was the first shift, and it must have impacted us very, very badly. I don't think our biology our chemicals must have accepted it, rejected, but maybe thousands of years later, we got acclimatized and, adapted to that. Similarly, orality to literacy, I think, is a fundamental shift where we denied our senses, we denied our biology. So this whole shift. So my interest is basically from the time when we stopped using our senses. That is a shift I'm trying to, understand and make sense. And the thing is that, when literacy came into being, two-dimensionality became our cognitive realm. So let me take you through one or two other simple, experiences. Like I'm sure, where is Delhi, where is Cochin, you must have traveled also, or just imagine traveling from Delhi to Cochin or from Cochin to Delhi, or for people in in other places, imagine from wherever you are going to north and, coming to south. Then you imagine this. When you're going to north, are you imagining that you're going up? Going to south means coming down. So this two-dimensionality is something that we experience in such a situation. Other thing that I would like you to, explore with me is that I would like you to imagine the earth. Just bring earth into your mind. You can just bring the earth into your mind. And okay, and now I want to know how many of you have seen an image of the earth. Maybe some of you have seen the image, and the other people, Vinay, can you tell me what is the size of the earth that you saw, that came into your mind? This big? This big?
Hello.
Huh.
Pardon?
Yeah, tell, how big was it?
What? The Earth?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Oval shape?
Pardon?
Oval shaped?
Oval shaped? No, I'm talking about the size. How much did you imagine that Earth to be? How big?
I can't. I didn't imagine that way. I mean, I just imagined it's huge.
Okay. So usually, you see, what I'm trying to talk about is that quite often I find people telling me that what they saw is the globe, like a football size. The usual image that comes to your head is the globe that you see in front of your office, no? or football size. That's usually what comes to the mind of people. So there are two more simple questions I just want to ask you. I'm just trying to check whether you remember something that you learned when you're in your school. What is the color of leaf? Can you quickly tell me? What is the color of leaf? Or say, what is the color of, okay, you don't have to tell me, but you can keep it in your mind. What is the color of sky? So what I'm trying to say is that how learning in the two-dimensional format, engaging with ready-made knowledge, stifles your system. That how you end up having a right answer for all this. So basically, and now we will move on to the language issue, because quite often when modern people start talking about humans, or even language, they assume that there is no difference between what an indigenous communities speak and what the modern people speak. So actually, these are entirely two different beingness. You can even call two species. Actually, we could even. That is the difference. That is the so much difference between these people's beingness. So there are two types of languages. The indigenous communities have what I call as experiential language, and the modern people have mental language. They claim it to be conceptual abstract, but it is not true at all. It's actually a mental language, mentally constructed language. It is neither conceptual nor abstract, because abstraction and conceptual things is actually part of a process that happens within you, which enables you to understand what is actually abstract and what is concept. So we directly jump into concept. And in the two types of languages, one language is Eyecentric. Usually, the literate language is Eyecentric, meaning I am the doer. So I would say I burned my finger, I made food, things like that. Whereas the indigenous communities languages, it is happening centered. I am part of the happening. We would say that haath jal gaya, my hand got burned, khana ban gaya, food got made. So I as a doer is absent in the indigenous. You can look at any oral languages and you will find that in that I as a doer is absent. I am part of the happening. So this is one very fundamental shift. So how did literacy bring in ego is one thing that we must explore, that I as a doer. Then, of course, these languages, the experiential language is process-centric. There are more adjectives and verbs, whereas modern language is more product-centered. It's a noun-based, many nouns, because see, all the qualities, adjectives, they're all turned into products and nouns. So one example I would say that playfulness is turned into play as an activity, whereas playfulness is actually a quality in the child. So in paradigms of being, I would say that there are two paradigms of being. One is an experiential paradigm, where your body, senses, the whole being is at work. Whereas amongst the modern beingness, it's a mental paradigm in which mind, language, reason is functioning. But see, body is just to carry the head. There is no other function for the body actually. So what is really important is to understand the formation of the mind. How literates are shaped by the word and how illiterates are shaped by the world. And how the shaping impacts us is something that we can explore. And other thing that I keep hearing is that, because the literates always claim that knowledge is transferred. That's a, thing that they keep talking about. And then they claim that amongst illiterates, knowledge is transferred orally, which is actually a completely mistaken notion, because amongst illiterates, knowledge gets recreated and verified in experience. So even though if somebody may say certain things, that is not believed. It's only when it is experienced, understanding is, is accepted that it is true. So, and I think the whole crisis is in understanding what is truly understanding. How does that, understanding actually takes place? Because see, what happens in the modern context is that we use conscious reasoning, and I am telling that it short circuits comprehension, because the actual understanding should take place within you. So in the literates, understanding happens in the realm of language and mind. Amongst illiterates, understanding happens in the realm of experience itself. It happens in the body. It's happened, so it's a something that it's not a linguistic phenomena. That's what I'm trying to talk about, So again, formation of the mind. So the processing system of both are different. You can say that one is creative and other one is analytic. The modern mental, mind is analytical mind, precisely because of language. So basically, what I began to do was to learn from children how they learn the world, because I think that is where we can really revisit and see. I don't think we can look at history, meaning you look at what has happened in the with the hunter-gatherers or people like that. We have every newborn child is giving us this clue that how to learn the world. We don't have to do a historical research on that. Just observe what children do without your interference, and then you can understand how did the first human being begin to learn, because the nature of learning has not changed. Because all living beings are learning. All living beings are learning. And what I'm telling is that modernity has completely misunderstood children, knowledge creation process, what constitutes knowledge, and of course the process called life itself, living itself. Why I'm telling we have not understood children is because the whole modern paradigm of education is based on how to teach. And then we never talk about knowledge creation. So let me now go into language a little bit more deeply. How children learn language. This is what I want to show. How children create knowledge and what is the role of language in that. So living is verb and language is noun. Children learn the world automatically in experiencing it. And then children learn to name their experiences. So understanding takes place prior to knowing the words. This is one thing very, very important to understand. That it is not in language that understanding is taking place. They understand even before they learn the word, they are understanding, they begin to understand things. So there is a primacy of senses in cognition in that sense. And what do children learn actually? Of course, they are learning the real world, but what of it? They learn various attributes of the world, which is the form, function, process, material, structure, relationship, and context. This may sound very, very new to you, but these are extremely simple things. And many of these things, most of the participants must have done it when they were young children, So I will show you those things, and maybe you may be able to recollect many of these activities that you did, or you look at, and you can look around and see what children are doing actually. And children are exploring what the world is about. How does it look? Which means form, size, color, shape, other attributes. How does it feel? Which means sensation, texture, temperature, etc. And how does it behave? Properties, whether it is soft, flexible, all these kind of aspects. And how children learn is they experience the whole, explore the parts, and natural synthesis take place. Now, let me take you through a very small video in which, you can see, you can check whether the child is creating knowledge in this. So you can see that there is a natural conditions, context. Unknown is the condition. The real world is the child is engaging with. There is no ready-made knowledge. There is no teaching. This is a primary condition for natural learning to take place. And development of natural processes at work. Learning process is getting awakened. Knowledge creation is happening. Comprehension is happening. All this is happening outside the realm of language. The child is being a scientist. There is a mathematical calculation happening. There is an understanding of physics. All these are not termed in these ways. These are intuitively, all this is at work, not separated into subjects, but everything is happening in a truly holistic manner. And qualities also, natural qualities are happening. Intelligence is awakened, creativity, being open, adventurous. See, you can see that this is actually what is called holistic learning, which has been completely appropriated by the modern educated people. So this is another very, very important video in my collection, one of my most important video. Just watch what the child and the friend is doing. What is the child observing? Please take the blessing. The child will bless you now. Thank you. And 22 people are there. Thank you. So what you find is the crux of learning, which is about finding similarity, finding differences. Now, this is the way our senses function. Senses, each time the senses remembers, try to recollect how did you start eating mango first time. First mango you ate, there was a sensation. Second time you ate mango. Third time you ate banana or something else. But each time when you ate, there was the sensation was making that, that remembering, this is what mango is. Of course, the name is unimportant, but that taste that our tongue was able to remember, or the mind, the body. So now let me take you through what I was telling, the form, function, process, things like that. Now this, do you remember doing this when you were little children? Taking a book and keeping it like this and calling it a house? Now children are doing much bigger one. They are making flats now. They are no longer happy with making a single story houses. They were part of a school that I ran a school for 3 years from 2011 onwards. We left children completely free, absolutely no teaching at all. And we began to document what children did. And we have thousands of videos on what children did spontaneously. And it is from these huge documentation that I was able to understand how do they actually create knowledge of the real world, and what is the role of language in that. So, this is a shop that they reconstructed, and how they brought in things that resembled the actual object. Like for example, the leaf that is hanging is dry fish, and they were looking for each and everything in a very, very interesting manner. So they brought in this leaf, this flower, because they didn't get, they wanted to have brinjal in their shop, and luckily they could find hibiscus for chilies. So what is interesting is that some places they choose something that looks similar shape-wise. In otherwise, it could be the color and function. I'm sure this also you must have done. spreading bedsheet over a table and called it a house. You played house like this. And process is making the house. I'm sure most people must have used pillow, chair, and all that and made houses or something else. You know, these days, because we are trapped in the house, then this is the only thing. Otherwise, I'm sure most people, other people must have made the houses using sticks and things like that, you know. And structure is the structural stability that is achieved, you know. And properties, I'm sure you all must have seen how children bounce on sofas, you know. So why do children bounce on sofa? And why don't they do it on a wooden chair? So what I began to do was to see certain fundamental similarity in every activity that children did spontaneously. So, you know, it's a good example of the whole thing has been explored, you know, form, shape, I mean, not the form, but the property of materials, the content, all that is explored here. So this is what I found very interesting. We understand the word metaphor in terms of language. But I'm seeing that children's metaphoric understanding actually happens in experience itself. It is not a linguistic phenomena, actually. It begins with an actual experience of looking for similarity in various things. You know, it can be based on various things. This comparison happens. It could be form, color, texture, you know. So this is a very interesting thing that these two are father and mother, you know, where they looked at the size as the thing to, you know, compare, and now they are sleeping. So one thing that is clear is that senses has access to the real world, whereas mind has access to language. Mind directly has no access to the real world. So this has to function together to understand the real world. So the problem with modernity is that it has banned the senses from their functioning. It's only a mental activity that is taking place in the realm of education. So how children learn language is something that I wish to share with you. Now in Bangalore slums, children learn 4 to 5 languages by the time they reach 4 years. No teaching, you know, and whichever language you learn, the context is the same. That is very important to understand. The context is not changing. Now, how do they create language? So sound and gestures are used for communication. Children itself, they create the meaning actually. So we can look at that. Adults provide the word, children hear the sound. Meaning get created in experience. What I mean by this is that, you know, when somebody is telling, suppose, you know, the mother is telling the father, keep the glass on the table or something like that. But so the child is seeing an action taking place. Then again, the father is here telling that bring the glass or something like that. So the glass is heard twice. But from the action itself, the child has understood what that words meant, that whole activity meant. When the child saw that when she heard the sound, kla, 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 that father went and kept the chair somewhere or the glass on the table or something like that, you know. So that activity is what the child has seen and deduced that this is what is meant by these, what that sound meant, you know. So the beginning of distortion is that when adults provide the meaning itself, then you're bypassing a child's autonomy in connecting the word and the world. This is very crucial. The child must create the connection between the word and the world. And the mind then begins to create a linguistic world and it begins to distort experience. Now, the best distortion of experience is that for modern people, children have 4 different activities. They are learning, they are playing, they are doing art, they are working. All are 4 different categories. Now, this is a category, mind-created category. For a child, there is only one activity. The child is doing things, that's all. And that doing is already learning. So this is a very good example of how the mind is distorting and creating artificial experience. And now we are telling that, yes, or you can even say that the existence of toys, no? How we have created toys for a child whereas children don't need toys at all, actually. So let me, again show you one very interesting example of how a child uses all this and create language. So a child, was using pa for water. Pa is what the child was using. But on seeing the sea for the first time, the child said pa boo with extended hands. So the hands actually extend itself and showed the hugeness of the water. And so you can see that pa is water, which is always there. Boo is the sound of the waves. And extended hands meant hugeness. So he constructed the whole sentence with this pa boo and the body, So children are responding to the context. It's contextual. They're integrating body, sound, and emotions. So one or two few more simple things I would share with you, and then we'll go into the next step. How children create categories. Oh, the child saw this peacock flying, and the child started telling, crow is flying, crow. So the thing was that and then of course it got down and started walking, the same peacock. Then the child said, dog is walking. So the child has actually created category called kaka, crow for all the flying ones, and kutta for all the walking animals. So this is the first layer of category that the child builds. And in terms of form, the child had seen billies first, cats. And the child's name for that was Billy was Mimi, cat was Mimi, and dog was Cuckoo. But on seeing the tiger, the child told it is Bada Mimi. It's a big cat. So what I'm again and again stressing here is that children have an autonomous way of understanding the world and creating language in the context of that, in their experience. So lion was interesting. The face was looking like Mimi, cat, and the body was like Cuckoo, the dog. So there was a confusion in the child. So categories are abstracted from the experience that arise from sensory response of the body. Hearing, smelling, all these are things that could be categorized depending upon what do they experience first. That becomes the first basis for the next experiences. So even without language, this process goes on, and language is just a convenient tool for identification and communication. Because various names like mango for amchi, manga, but the taste remains the same. No? So learning language in the natural way is what I'm talking about, where retaining the integrity of the mind and body, retaining the integrity of word and the world. I'm bringing this because the fundamental problem of modernity is that the mind and body is fragmented. Because we keep talking about how to be whole, as if our default is disintegration, fragmentation. How we got fragmented is something that we are not willing to look at, And how does a child go through that process? Because when we were born, we were not fragmented. So what is it that in our life that fragmented us is something that we should explore. And it is not something that happened in the Industrial Revolution or something like that. How did it happen to you and me is the question. It's not a historical question. It's a personal, individual question that we need to encounter. How did I got fragmented? It's very easy to say that it got fragmented in Industrial Revolution, or that kind of thing. But it's not going to, there's no way we can address that in our at a personal level at this time, unless we, understand it. Where did it happen to me? At which point? So understand. So one very important thing that I understood from this is that conscious memory is not needed at all, because this is the whole tragedy of modernity, is that we have made memory into a conscious activity. And reasoning is not done consciously. Reasoning is something that happens within us. because these are biological capacities with which we are already endowed with, We don't have to memorize things. Memory is already part of our system. But that has a very, very important, rules. If you remove the context, memory is going to be problematic because you're removing language from its context and wanting to remember. So I think, this is the most important question that we should encounter, that how is our mind getting formed? Again, not a historical question, but a question that individual question that we must encounter. But how was my mind got distorted? How did I become analytical? How did I stop using my senses? Why do I not see anything? So in the formation of the mind, what should be the content of the mind? An important point to be asked. Who should create the mind? Should the teacher do it? Should the book do it? Or should you automatically, as you experience the world, this should happen to you? And what is the process by which it should get created? Whether it should get created naturally, autonomously, automatically, or it should be artificially engineered. And so I talk about what is called as a cognitive condition. See, of course, you can see that there are two fundamental cognitive conditions, one of indigeneity and other one of modernity. Indigeneity, it is the unknown, which is the cognitive condition. And amongst the modern, of course, we are dealing with what is known. And from learning means automatically understanding the world, to being taught. So this is a fundamental cognitive condition difference that modernity is bringing in. So from my understanding of children, let me share with you what I think is the way cognitive foundation gets built in a child when there is no teaching at all. Their inherent qualities and abilities are already there. The first layer is sensory inputs. Even word is entered only as sound. Second layer is sensory input and the words. When the words come in, they begin to connect these connection. Then, of course, there is imagination happens. And of course, you can see how pronoun is a result of first noun entering you. And then you learn how to inference from concrete inputs. Abstraction is actually part of this, and conceptual understanding begins to happen. So there is a very clear process by which a conceptual understanding happens from concrete inputs. Whereas in the modern context, what is happening is that the inherent abilities are denied, and direct linguistic inputs is giving you, and directly to the mind. So bypasses the senses, mind plus language, construction of ideas. Of course, you can create all kinds of ideas. So this is where we are mistaking that, we can do permutation, combination, create more and more strange ideas and think we are creative, but there is no real contextual reference. And all, see, again, this term called objectivity is completely distorted. Actually, literates have very, very distortedly subjective, because basically these are opinions. What is not an opinion is something that you experience. In the realm of language, you can only have opinions. So in the unknown, what happens is that curiosity, observation, I'm just running through this. The unknown as a context, what happens, it's a natural kind of a progression. So this is one kind of a cognitive system in which the source is unknown, characteristics are disorganized and holistic, integrated, in context, in relation with everything else, multisensory. Whereas the cognitive tools are senses, intuition, insight, many things like that. And cognitive process is experiencing, language integrated with experience. Cognition is self-organization. Understanding is not your choice. It gets organized on your own. Exactly the way we learned our mother tongue. We did not make any effort. We began to speak. Whereas the known has a completely different kind of a cognitive condition. See, with known, you can only do reasoning and analysis. That's all you can do. You don't need to be observant. It doesn't demand observation. Naturally, there's lots of wonder because what is there to know? You know, you're already linguistic, you know, it's all being told to you. And of course, the quantification is the final result of that, you know, measurement, quantification. And of course, modernity celebrates boredom because I don't think it understands what is not boredom. Because you go to any rural tribal area, then you will know what is to be a non-bored person. And cognitive system of this is that, you know, your source is known, decontextualized, reduced, distorted, linear, sequential, fragmented, compartmentalized, but organized and concluded. This is a very important thing to understand, that you're already dealing with what is organized and concluded. That is why educated people are very confident in their answers, because what they've already gone in is, you know, it's already done, it's finished, you know, you don't have to hold doubt at all with that. Cognitive tools, eyes and ears in service of the mind. This is very important to understand how senses have been rewired to function as the tool of the mind rather than its physiological function. Mind has completely taken over that, and the process is reading, storing information, memorizing, and reasoning. And conscious reasoning is So what I say is that cognitive dissonance, so many of the terms that modern people use needs redefinitions actually. And the most important thing I feel is that cognitive dissonance. That's a term that is being used. I'm telling that cognitive dissonance is when the body and mind are learning two different things. That is what is actually happening. Body is imbibing experience, it's not a choice. Whereas mind is engaging with language. For example, in the classroom, what is that mind engaging with is what the teacher is talking. What the body is experiencing is something else altogether. Body is experiencing fear initially, certainty. There are completely different experience of the body in the classroom. Body is not engaging with what is being taught. There's no physics happening in front of them. The teacher teaching. So there is a fragmentation of the body and mind throughout the classroom. Sorry, what is it? So fragmenting the body and mind. So what is actually happening in modern context is that we are engineering children. Cognitive autonomy is completely denied because of teaching and instructing and helping. And they are misled from the real world to description, distorted, simplified, miniaturized, and now cartoonized, you know. They only engage with cartoons. It's actually a crime against humanity, actually, exposing children to cartoons, you know. Then people think it's fantastic. They should see the real world, actually. And you can see how the senses are completely distorted in the from seeing to reading. And other very important thing is that how I was telling about the whole memory. So I would like to show you one very, very interesting experiment that took place in Germany, in Japan. So this is a chimpanzee was shown 1 to 19 numbers kept in random. And of course, there was some amount of training.
Here is a Ayumu chimpanzee.
Just give me 1 minute. I would like to share the sound. Just give me 1 minute.
Code.
Can you hear?
Here is a Ayumu chimpanzee touching the Arabic numerals from 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, even more. So 1 through 19, he knows the order of the numerals. So based on this skill, we tested the memory capability of chimpanzee. After touch 1, the other numerals gone. Turn to be white rectangles. Touch 1, the others gone. But he touched 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay? After touch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Don't worry, you cannot do it. But the chimpanzee, they can do it. Okay? After touching 1, the other numerals gone. So this task is much even difficult. 7 numerals, 1 and 4 are missing, and very briefly presented. Still he can remember it. I tested the same thing with my students, Kyoto University students.
So this was actually again tested with one person who is very good in these kind of skills.
He's a college graduate and a crossword addict, but how good is his working memory? When Chris reckons he has memorized a layout, he touches 1. When the others are hidden, he must try to recall 2 to 9 in ascending order.
It takes me ages to remember where they're all placed, and then I think I've got it. It's really very, very difficult.
In 30 attempts, Chris only once reached 9 without making a mistake.
So, in the same experiment, this person was telling, it's a Japanese scientist, he was telling that children were able to do this much better than, grown-ups, educated grown-ups. So I've always been thinking that memory has a very, so we have a different system of memory completely. And once you destroy that, and then you're making this person go through this, and I can assure you that if you try it with a non-literate person, the same experiment, I'm sure they will be able to remember this much better, because the way of memorizing itself is very different. You see, when a child is looking at something, like the way I showed you the first picture, those images, the child is able to see the whole thing. Whereas a literate mind do not have the ability to see the whole. It remembers sequentially. There's a linear sequential mind is at function. Our mind is already, our eyes are already distorted. Whereas actual seeing is the whole. It doesn't have this linear sequential kind of seeing. So the difference is somewhere else, not what they are talking about actually. Learning is a two-way process. Literates are shaped by the world, and illiterates. So there is learning basically means what we are engaging with will shape us. For example, I would like to ask you, who taught you cycling, or who taught you swimming, or who taught you chapati making? I'm sure most of you must be thinking it is your friend, your mother, your father, somebody like that, So what I'm trying to say is that cycling can only be taught by the cycle. Swimming can only be taught by water. And chapati making can only be taught by atta. Because the ability to cycle, the qualities that you require lies in the cycle. Your parents doesn't have, your friend doesn't have it. So this is a very, very important thing to understand, that whatever we engage with, the characteristic of that is what we acquire to understand that. So naturally, when you're engaging with the written word, you acquire all those qualities that are inherent in the written word, and then that is what gets built into your system. So the operating system of a modern mind is linear, sequential, fragmented, compartmentalized, out of context, past, analytical, well. So rationality basically is a product of what is engaging with the known. So this, I would like to remind you that if you remember the reading of Western history, 18th century is known as Age of Reason. Around that time, exactly, I don't know, but there is a phase called Age of Reason. And that Age of Reason actually falls 300 years after the printing press was established. And printing press is what, in the 300 years, reading became very common activity of the society at that time. So naturally, they were dealing with what is known. And what I think is that is what actually brought in reason as a way of understanding. Whereas the non-literate mind, their operating system is simultaneous, holistic, present, in process, and synthesis happens automatically. And nature of written language is also this, linear, sequential, fragmented, compartmentalized, out of context. Knowledge brings in certainty, And nature of experience is non-linear, simultaneous, holistic, present, in process, self-organizing. And it's interesting that how literacy has begun to dictate terms, even when we talk about, the life, the cultural conditions of indigenous communities, illiterate communities. So I will just end this with a simple. Oh, let's begin to talk now. I think this is getting boring for me also. Sorry. It became a little dragging for me, so I thought, oh.
So that was right decision at right moment. So that's perfectly all right. That the moment you felt it like that, then you could switch over to the direct or whatever is possible, more direct kind of communication.
Yeah.
So it's open for questions now. The house. Everybody is most welcome, and you can address him directly.
And also open your videos if you feel like.
Yeah. Switch on your
Nice
cameras
to
if it
see
is
each
possible.
other,
Yeah.
no?
Otherwise, you all are mediated, no?
Yeah.
Or more mediated than necessary. So questions, if we have any, Deepak?
Yeah, because when Jinan says that the conscious reasoning is not at all required. So, this brings so many questions.
Only in terms of knowledge creation. Of course, when we want to book our ticket, we may have to do conscious reasoning. But I'm talking about knowledge creation,
Okay, yeah. But yeah, okay. So I'm just wondering, with experiential knowledge, is it possible to learn all those things, these scientific things, what we learned with this reasoning ability. So is it possible? I don't think.
I'm not sure. You see, what I'm trying to say is that you people like Newton, Einstein, and all that, no, especially Newton and all that. I'm sure they must have been a very different kind of learners, no, experiencing, experimenting, exploring. They were not reading books and talking about these things, no.
Yeah, but they were imagining. I mean, it is kind of mental activity only. And
no, based on solid experiences. See, the difference is this: there are authentic learners, and what modernity creates 90% inauthentic clones in the name of education. There may be 2% authentic learners, and they are, because in spite of education, in spite of this, they are saved from this nonsense. Not because of education.
This we can agree that, but I think they are both are required. The experiential knowledge and also the reasoning. Because I see to learn a complicated thing, you need certain kind of language to put it in abstract. I mean, you cannot experience everything in the world
No, Deepak, actually, there is some misunderstanding in this. Now, see, my feeling is that in childhood, don't damage their brain system.
Mm-hmm.
What you're actually doing is that you're completely distorting the brain, and then at a later stage, you're trying to use reason. See, for somebody who has mindset proper, if they use reason, there won't be a problem. But someone who is already alienated, fragmented, damaged, when they are using their brain in a very non-contextual way, they're assuming that they are understood things. You see, you can look at the whole activism that is happening in the name of environmental activism. And you can see that every time they come with a solution, there is a problem. You look at alternative education. Just take one example of alternative education. You know, I can tell you that not one alternative education actually addresses the fundamental question of creation of knowledge. Nobody talks about it. So everybody is using reasoning and creating more and more techniques and more alternatives, but not one is right, because they are not addressing two fundamental questions. One, what constitutes knowledge? Second, how knowledge gets created. So in a distorted mind, using reasoning is already distortion. We are already distorted. So the fundamental problem is that is where the fundamental problem lies.
Yeah, but I think it is a matter of proportion how much we should keep the experiential knowledge and this abstract knowledge. I mean, yeah, they may be missing out, but I think
what I'm trying to say is that there is nothing called abstract knowledge in modernity. They're creating a mind story about it. Let me again come back to children. There is a notion that children need toys. There is something called scientific toys. All these are bullshits, actually. Well, life has already equipped children to understand the world in a certain way. There is nothing called toys in a child's. See, child would use any object as a toy. Any object is a potential toy for a child. Any object. Yesterday, some friend sent me a picture, fantastic picture of two combs put on one comb is kept, lying down like this, and two combs are on that, like this. Two combs. And she's telling now the child is told this is an aeroplane. If you actually I have documented what children have done spontaneously. Every damn thing they see, they recreate with whatever they have. So there is fantastic imagination that is taking place. They are comparing how things look. See, it's actually the real cognitive process lies there in recreating the world. They recreate experience, they recreate objects. And that is the way of understanding what the world is all about. So without understanding some fundamental factors, we are talking about education. Because they already, see, the trap is that we are already in the paradigm of teaching how to teach. This is the paradigm of modern education. And knowledge is written, it's all ready-made. So within that context, naturally reasoning would be there, no? Because without reason, how do you deal with this at all? So I am actually asking for a more fundamental way of looking at it.
So may I come in here? Just
yes, sir, please.
For a question. Ashutosh here. Hi.
Yeah,
hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah. So my question was primarily for the from children's point of view and teaching as a whole. What you are saying is that the existing amount of knowledge that we have and the way we are transferring that knowledge to the children, there is a disconnect. So should we have more practical ways of teaching the same thing?
No teaching at all. No teaching at all. No teaching. You see, let's not go into children. Let's look at all the people who are sitting here who are educated. How much do we actually know? Let's not worry about children. We have learned all kinds of things. Nah? I'm sure all of you have some degree or the other. What do you actually remember? What do you actually know? So what is the result of all this nonsense about transferring knowledge? How do we actually know anything? See, it's nothing but superstition. Modern education is nothing but superstition. We are believers of modern knowledge. Newton and Einstein are our new gods. That's all. And left, right, and center, you can see how people use, it's scientific. It has been proved. And nobody is asking anything after that. That's a new religion that is happening. No? Modernity is a new religion in which you are made to believe in experts. They're new. So there is a fundamental crisis in living, in being. That is what I think we should be looking at. That's what I feel. You see? So I am not against knowledge. Please understand this. I am not against knowledge at all. In fact, I where I got bored and I dropped was the point where I wanted to actually talk about what is actually knowledge creation. How do actual knowledge gets created? Because you see, I feel that knowledge creation, implicit knowledge is available to all of us. Implicitly, we are all Newtons and Einsteins. Don't have any doubt about that. That little child knew physics, fundamentals of physics. Without that, the child will not be able to act at all. Internally, I'm not talking about consciously, not in the mind. The body knew laws of physics. mathematics, all that the child knew, how to calculate. So intuitively, see, or you take the example of, we all learn to speak our mother tongue without learning grammar. Am I right? All of us are able to speak quite well. We don't know ABCD of grammar. We are able to speak very well, right? And if you remember your young age, when first, third, fourth standard, or whenever the grammar was taught to you, I think for most of us it was worse than learning mathematics. Grammar was the most terrible subject. Imagine a situation where, after our ability to speak very well, we are asking children to become aware of how we are speaking. We ourselves will decode how language is structured. It's very easy, actually. It's only a matter of metacognition, meta-awareness of how we are speaking, that will reveal to us how we are structuring language, how the grammar gets, or how grammar is, the rules of grammar. Because see, exactly the way a child named the glass, the connection between the actual glass and the word glass, how they connected. This is the process, actually. When a child sees that a language, how the repetition of a word happens, how the noun happens, the structure of language, it's a very organized system, basically. So the child will be able to understand the pattern. And once the pattern is understood, the child is able to decode grammar. And I can tell you, the grammar could be the most interesting thing for everybody, provided you. Now, how many of you are actually interested in grammar? All of you have learned grammar. Tell me, now about 20 people are here. You know, why is it that we hate everything that has been taught to us after education? This is a question I want to ask. Why is that nobody is committed to learning? People talk about lifelong learning. What it actually means is that you enroll and pay money. It's actually to trap you again into a consumerist system of education. They're not talking about true lifelong learning. True lifelong learning is not a choice for an illiterate person. He is learning all the time. Learning is not a choice. Implicit learning is happening all the time. We are disconnected from that because our system has been completely damaged. One more example I want to tell you. Why is there is crisis in modern parenting? Why is that parents, all educated people, do not know how to parent? Why is it so? Why is that the most basic need of a species to sustain life is to understand how to look after children? Why is it there are so many parenting workshops happening all around? So there is something fundamental crisis to modern human beings which they are completely unwilling to face.
So I agree with most of the points that you've listed there.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, grammar is a very good example of, something that we do not need, right? And specifically, if I speak from, let's say, technical aspect of it, rather than poetry and literature and arts and other subjects.
Yeah.
There is no need for it, grammar is not needed at all. In fact, logic, specifically, if we go towards, creating a logical system, like, let's say, in IT, we write software. There is, very little is needed. The syntax and everything includes maybe not more than, 500 words and some operators, and that's it.
Yeah.
And beyond that, the logic is created by us. So my point was, when we speak of experiential learning, how that can be, introduced into a system where we learn subjects which are out of bounds of, let's say, humanities and others. Because if you really say science, then you have to go abstract. There is no, because unless you have a set of knowledge, you cannot build upon it. The whole idea of teaching children of, the existing facts of science, existing theories, existing formulas, is that now the next line of scientists will be able to build upon it. So if you do not understand it, because you cannot experience everything that Newton, and then, from Archimedes and before them, and then Planck, and then Kepler, and then Newton, and then Einstein, and then Hawking, and then, the current fame and all. So how would that continue? So whatever you're saying is perfectly all right for some shape or form, but I don't think the scientific learning would fall into the paradigm. However, it heavily derives, because the theoretical physicists actually do imagine the real world constructs. They imagine the situations happening in front of them, right? So if there's a lift and it is falling freely, and I have a pizza in my hand, this is how they think and actually write their mathematical equations, validate their equations. These are called thought experiments. So that experience, that they calculate. But the point is, the abstract is again an integral part, because without that, it cannot be propagated, it cannot be expressed, and it cannot be passed on to the future generation. So I was saying, that is why Deepak was saying that both have to go hand in hand, and experiential learning has taken a beating. There is no focus on it anywhere. Everyone is just pushing for having more and more bookish knowledge, if I would term it like that.
Yeah. No, actually, see, what is happening is that, because we have not understood the true nature of learning, all new experiments are distorting it. So now there is this forest learning in Finland. Now everybody is after that. There is this Montessori method that is, so the problem is that nobody has really understood what is the inherent capacity of a child. So this is where the problem lies, So of course, knowledge, all that is there. But the first 12 years, I think it should be the far more important time when the child needs to be completely free. Freedom, what I mean is that freedom is more of an existential quality that I'm talking about. I'm talking about cognitive freedom. And cognitive freedom is how should your cognitive system develop? That is what I'm trying to talk about, So once you do that, see, for example, we can also look at all the traditional knowledge systems, where there is no such strict teaching that was happening. Whether you look at the Ayurvedic knowledge or any other knowledge that has been there in the knowledge of architecture, all these great temples and all these things have been built by people, and they have a completely different system. So I think we need to revisit most of this question. So I'm not telling I have all the answers, but there are some fundamental issues that I'm raising which needs to be held and then explored in that context, So the issue with modernity is that they're always reacting, they're not responding so we are not. So alternative education is a reaction to the mainstream education without changing the paradigm. The first question we need to ask is that if children are creating knowledge, how do they do it? And what is the knowledge that they are creating? And how do we enable a process? So none of this we are trying to look at.
So there are some more questions.
Language in that. Sorry, Dia.
Yes, okay. I mean, it's in the chat. For example,
Ravi wanted to. Ravi's hand is.
Yeah, I mean, you can ask your question directly. I mean, Ravi and Velmani, and there are other. So first it was
Sharanya.
D. What's the full? I mean, D on for everyone. What is the best way to manage children or engage children below 3 years when both parents are working?
One of you have to stop working. There's no other. See, we have put ourselves in such a difficult situation that there are no easy solutions. Actually, you see, we have taken almost 500 years to destroy this whole system. I'm talking from the printing press time, So I don't think it can be finished in one generation. If you start, exploring this, maybe in 2-3 generations time, we can sort it out. I'm not sure, but at least, there's no shortcut for all this. Somebody has to. And then other thing that I find is that this whole nuclear family breaking up, everything has created a situation which is completely anti-child. So we need to look at whether the kind of life we are leading is worth, the kind of life. I'm not talking about life itself, but the kind of life that we are leading, with all this. It's really no good for children, actually. We are creating more and more alienated people.
Yeah.
So, Sharanya, I wanted to ask something. Why don't you ask, Sharanya?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not that the experiential learning, no, you told that first 12 years. So even as us, when you were telling about Siddha and Ayurveda, if we want to really know about Siddha and Ayurveda, none of us are ready to go and sit in a patashala where they prepare the medicines, procure the herbs, see it with our eyes, experience the smell. No, we read blogs. How many of us read blogs? How many of us go to the internet to search and do about Ayurveda? So I could really connect when you told that example. But my son, I had only one question in mind. So now my son is in that questioning phase. So now he's asking me, what is toilet? What is I? So what is AC? So how, as a parent, when I say that answer, I told the answer without knowing it's going to damage his formation of knowledge. So he asks me the same questions and I keep repeating the same answer until he registers memory. Till then he keeps asks me what is a AC. So how do I not no, I'm lost there. If you could just give me some guidance, I will not damage his cognitive ability of finding the answer for himself.
No, I don't have any solutions like that. You see, usually in the non-literate context, nobody asks questions. So you see, when we get into the realm of language, then questions as a linguistic phenomena begin to happen. First thing I want to tell you is that when a child is sitting on a sofa and bouncing, it is both the question and an answer integrated. There is a question that is already as an existence, it's there in the child. That is why the child is going around and exploring things, touching and doing things, making things. Once in a while, they might come and ask, but they're not serious questions. They will go back and explore, So our problem is that we have turned questioning and all that into a linguistic format. Is one of the, you see, in indigenous communities, people don't talk much. They are into doing, they're living. They're not talking. We are talking about life, but they are living actually, So there I don't see much question, but they are busy doing all the time, Children are extremely busy all the time. We have another term for that now, busy children. We call them, what is that? Hyperactive, no? There's some term like that. Yeah. We can't handle children, so we call them hyperactive. Because children are like that. You see, in the rural area, children are doing, from morning till evening, they are into doing something or the other. We want to numb them. So
I'll just share. So my son likes to go and bump on my mother. She's a bit bulky. So what he was trying is, so what he'll just go and bump on her and feel that bounce. What he did is he just moved 5 steps back. He ran and he bumped. He moved 10 steps back. He ran and he bumped. So I told my mother, don't stop. He's learning momentum. Let him experience what it feels. Now I feel stupid to have even labeled it as momentum, no? But that was so, when you told, I really like.
Absolutely. You're right. These kind of terms is what is creating problem. We're then freezing their exploration. Language is not, let them arrive at that. They can even have another name for that. It doesn't matter. But they're experientially knowing the whole thing, no? Thank you, Sharanya. This is fantastic what you just told about your mother. Poor mother.
Just told her, okay, I know it pains for you, but just stop. He's exploring that momentum. Let him explore how far and what is the speed he can do. Thank you, sir. I have one humble request, sir. So, you might feel bored, but no, when you told that how knowledge is actually created was the second part of the presentation. I've signed up for your unparenting workshop from Chennai. I'm hoping to meet you there.
Sure.
So I would, so for real seekers like us, we would like to really hear to the entire story. Or else it feels like, Pragaladan just going inside half of the Chakravyuga, but not knowing how to
get out.
So,
no, that's a 5-day thing, 5 days. So this is, I can only do a trailer here, just because it's almost like a 30 years of research and documentation and all that. So it will take time to share. Thank you very much. Ravi, you have something to, Ravi. Hi, Ravi.
Yeah, hi. Lovely meeting you, Jinan, after 11 years, or 10 years rather.
Yeah.
One question that I had was, you've had indigenous communities living this unfragmented, pure way of knowing and being. And these communities today are facing the brunt of development, are having, they're facing incredible violence and damages on their way of living.
Yeah.
So they also need knowledge to engage and interface with modernity and the modern society and economy.
Yeah.
Where will that knowledge come from? So you had indigenous communities who had all this knowledge, who had all this unfragmented way of being.
Yeah.
You lost in this, and who are continuously losing in this economy and society. So how do you bridge it, and how do you work with them so that they are able to not lose in this violent system?
Yeah.
So what kind of knowledge?
Yeah, I understand. We understand this because the same thing is happening with children. When children are born, they are born with the original capacity of a true living being, of an integrated being, which is life. And we brutally turn them against life because of this modernity. So it's a long process, so many people will have to, I think it's a more of a spiritual crisis, very deep crisis of humanity, consciousness crisis, It's not something, I don't think that, through activism, of course, all these are important. I'm not demeaning that, that we have to do whatever is, possible within us. But I think this is a long drawn out crisis because modern human beings are turned against life. It's not just indigenous communities, against their own children, against living, the very nature of living itself, So it's a crisis that has to be solved in a very different way, with much more deeper internal looking, rather than, meaning the crisis is in the way of our formation, Frankly, I don't have any solutions for that. I'm aware, because I also, when I see what is happening to children, I don't know what to do. And of course, Ravi, I'm also living with the rural communities, and I can see the destruction that is happening and the damage that is happening to them because of their qualities. You see, indigenous communities trust much more than the modern community people, So they don't have they never doubt that a merchant can actually cheat them. That the food that we're eating is poisonous is something that they cannot even think of, It's an unimaginable kind of thing. So it is the quality of a being that is at brutally being killed, That's something that is so trustworthy, something that is so fantastic of how to be is being destroyed because of an insensitive modern minds. So so our choice is not to make indigenous people like us. It is us who should become like them. I don't know how all that will happen, but definitely in terms of, I always imagine that suppose life is given life has a final decision to take, whether they want to keep indigenous communities or literate, educated, all those great guys. I'm sure they will, with not even thinking once, they will destroy all the educated. Because they don't need them at all. They would definitely keep the indigenous. If you ask a tree, whom would they want? They will definitely choose indigenous people, non-literate people, because they are the ones who are connected with life. They are nature. So, Ravi, this is the.
Yeah, I want to follow the question with a more practical question. What is the age at which you are going to introduce words and the modern way of knowing?
No, see, we don't have to really do that. We don't see now what is happening in the modern context is that right from, because I always look at what happens in the West, because it will come to us also soon. So a small child is even taught how to speak, how to do this. So the basic assumption is that children are absolute idiots. And when you actually teach a child, when you treat a child like an idiot, the learning that the child imbibes is he is an idiot. He is in fact an idiot, because that is the way you're treating them. The moment you treat the child with respect, with absolute capability, absolute trust, then the child will live up to that. This is one very simple cognitive activity. I don't know why cognitive scientists have not understood this basic thing. It's a very fundamental thing. That what you do, because they are the ones who are promoting cognitive theories and all these activities. Now they're teaching parents how to teach children. I mean, absolute absurdity. This is what, again, this is the problem with you. Actually, you study what is happening in cognitive science. It's absolute nonsense that is happening. First of all, the assumption that cognition is just a mind activity is itself is an absurd activity. I understanding now. How can the mind function alone? Of course, it is functioning alone now in the context of modernity because it is only the mind that has been activated. But that doesn't happen at all in a natural way. That is the whole distortion. So there is a fundamental crisis of modern science which we need to, address. And I think the only way to address this is revisiting how children learn and create knowledge, because that is where the whole crux of the thing lies, actually.
Your personal question of cognition and knowledge creation, whereas my question is from a different angle. There are certain things that an indigenous community needs to learn to be able to oppose the unfair, violent transactions that they have to engage with.
Yeah.
What are those learning? What enables those kinds of learning? And when do you introduce that? So without an English language education, without understanding the political, bureaucratic ways, the way these political systems work, how the bureaucracy works, they're not going to be able to, put an opposition to that, to those forces. So, and that needs to be introduced at some stage. At what stage do you introduce them? And all of that is coming from
frankly, I don't have any answer for this here. I really don't have. It's like telling that how do you teach a child that there is something called lie? Because their existence is in truth. They're not being truthful. They are truth. They do not know there is something called lie at all. Because I remember how I taught a child how to lie. So he did something and I told him that, tell me the truth. That's what I told him. I remember. Tell me the truth. That is then when he realized that there is something other than truth. So my first teaching, second time he came and told me something, and then I knew, and then his face was telling me he's lying. So I told him that I know you're lying because your face is telling. So I gave him the second lesson. In order to lie, you must have a different face. And now he is an expert. You see? So the issue is this. No, this is a strange position that we are in. How do we tell children that the world, there are a lot of lies in the world when they don't even know what a lie is? I'm talking about this may be too ideal, but this is how a child is born, how a child exists. Is in that, that is not, it's not an ideal romanticization that I'm talking about. When do a child learns that there is something called lying?
So there are some other questions. We can move forward to those questions.
Yeah.
Vilmani Karthik, can you ask the question directly? And one more request: if you wish, you can write down your email addresses so that we can be in touch with each other after this discussion is over. No? So in the chat box, you can, if you wish, to keep in touch with us. No? So thank you. So now it's the turn of Vilmani Karthik. Should I read the question aloud, or would you like to ask the question directly?
Ask the question. I don't like to read.
Yeah.
So who is D? D is lifting the hand up. D.
This question was already addressed. To what is the best way to engage children below 3 years?
Hello, sir.
D.
This is yeah. Sorry. So my question was, I'm actually a developmental pediatrician, and I see a lot of children with developmental disorders. And I've been seeing a lot of parents, what they do and how they do and how that impacts their child. But there are also parents who do not do anything, and they are, they don't give screen time, and still there are children who have speech delays and developmental delays. So how do we kind of understand that, we can, because we believe in early intervention. We cannot wait till the child speaks on their own at 2.5, 3, just like that, because that's what we used to think in olden days. And but there are a lot of children who may not speak at the age of 3 if you don't intervene early also. So how do you balance this newly existential knowledge versus the old school knowledge?
I'm not very sure, because I think many of this modern things are part of consumerism. It's not you know, I don't have much belief in that actually. You see, in earlier times, see, one thing is that in earlier times, there were more people around the child who are talking to each other, not to the child. The child, you don't have to talk to the child. The child must hear people speaking to each other. So that's why I gave the example of Bangalore slums, where no teaching at all is happening and nobody is going and talking to the child, but the child is constantly hearing people talking to each other. So the child has to listen to people speaking to each other, which has now become very, very rare in nuclear families, husband, wife, who are busy, or, you know, and also the very condition of using chair, that itself, people, you know, yeah. So, sorry, I lost.
No, so my question is, when a child naturally, I mean, can pick up things, I totally agree with, you know, what you're saying, but there are also children who may not, right? Because of their developmental problem, whatever they are having, because there are some genetic disorders. We cannot pick it up probably less than 1 year. Only once they start developing, you pick up certain disorders later in life. And thinking that, yes, this child, if you put whatever environment you're telling, if you put the child in the environment also, he may not develop to that extent. Then how do you deal with such a kind of a situation then? Because you believe that every child has the inherent capability to learn and do things, which is natural, and I agree with that. But obviously there are medical disorders, there are developmental disorders, and there are children who are not able to pick up, right? We cannot completely generalize this idea and go. So my question is, how do we go about in such a kind of scenario is what I'm trying to ask you. I'm not sure if I tried to ask you the question.
No, I got your, your question I got, but I don't have any answer for that actually. So that's why.
So see, there is a child who doesn't have any issue till 1.5 years of age. And there is a regression noted at 1.5 years. And then at 2 years, he stops talking, stops looking, which is obviously the disorder's name is autism now. But there is a child like that. So how can we just think that every child will do whatever they have to do without doing anything is what I'm also trying to understand. Because this is a new area for me also to explore and understand. And I want to help parents do the right thing also.
So I wouldn't know if this is the answer. Maybe I'll turn on my video. But there is a lot more to the lifestyle, the genetic disorders, what like lifestyle the parents led, what lifestyle their parents led, what is the amount of food. You can ask this one question: are they living in a nuclear setup or a joint family setup? An apartment setup where they constantly talk to their neighborhood, or they are just isolated with their work environment? What is the recent place they took the child to? Have they exposed them to all places of nature like forest, desert, park, sand, mud, waterfalls, everything? So the answer, your questions, the parents will end up answering about their own lifestyle and their own. I've heard from a close friend of mine that no child is a special child. Every child is a special child, and they all have the inherent very good capabilities. It is only like Jinan said, our own knowledge we are giving the label of the modern word called autism, giving them modern word saying that this baby is ADHD. He just has so many energy he can't spend. He's just that he's not having an environment or a trustworthy person or a heart-to-heart connection to anyone, that is not ready to communicate. That we labeled as autism. So I'm sorry, I just shared my viewpoint. I'm not sure if it's the solution, but it roots to the parents and the way of upbringing and the lifestyle, right from the food to the sleep to the gadgets, everything that is involved in the life.
Yeah.